I'd like to introduce Dr. Joshua Sparrow, who's the Director of Strategy, Planning, and Program Development at Brazelton Touchpoints Center, Boston Children's Hospital. He's also the Director of the Brazelton Touchpoints Foundation. His work with the Brazelton Touchpoints Center has included consultation on child development and parenting to the Harlem Children's Zone, to American Indian Early Head Start programs, and to the UNICEF. He's a co-author with Dr. Brazelton of 8 books, and the title of his talk is Culture, Community, and Context in Child Development. Please join me in welcoming Dr. Sparrow.
Thank you. Can you hear me? Oh, good. I'd like to start by thanking everybody who has worked so hard to bring us all together, especially Darsha, and to thank all of you for joining us on this beautiful Saturday afternoon. This is an overview of what I'm going to try to do and still finish by 3:25. These are the main ideas I'd like to try to cover. And I think you'll see that there is a lot of convergence with some of the ideas that Dr. Perry presented to you. So we will be looking at human development as an emergent phenomenon that proceeds through periods of disorganization and reorganization that depend on the relationships that we just saw towards the end of the last talk, and that evolve in complex systems. And I wasn't going to use this slide, but I just put it back in because I thought it was so close to what we just heard. This is the current vision of the Brazelton Touchpoints Center, and I did want to tell you a little bit about the angle from which I come to this work. It is for all children to grow up to be adults who cope with adversity, who strengthen their communities, who constructively participate in civic life, steward our planet's resources, and nurture the next generation to be prepared to do the same. And to tell you a little bit about the work of the Brazelton Touchpoints Center, I've struggled to describe this in just a sentence, and recently have come up with this. It's to restore the position of babies and children as the first priorities of communities and societies everywhere. So, that's not always how people respond. Sometimes they say, really? And I say, yes, really, because we are wired to organize ourselves and to adapt to each other and to our environments to ensure our reproductive success and that of our offspring. And because when we do put babies before all else, it helps us really sort through all of the choices that we must make. And we really can, I think, organize the rest of our human endeavors more effectively and morally when babies are at the center. And so this is why I think it ought to be the first priority, and I'm delighted that there are so many of you who agree. And I say restore because I think, as you heard in the last talk, and I think it's why many of you are here for this conference, we all know that there are powerful and often inadvertent, unintended consequences resulting from the forces that act on evolutionary biology's imperative for the survival of our species, of our children. So many people say, well, that's awfully ambitious, don't you think? And so I say, well, somebody's got to do it, right? And obviously we can't do it alone. It is really up to all of us. So I'd like to start, as I said, by talking about human development as this emergent phenomenon by describing touch points. It's come to mean a number of different things, a dynamic developmental theory that has specific implications for practice change in all of the sectors involved in working with babies, children, and their families. And I think, as you see, I'm really a clinician at heart. So much of my talk will return to the clinical work. This particular model for understanding development has very specific implications for working with children and families, and it really fits right in with what Dr. Perry said at the end of his talk with regard to the critical importance of multiple relationships for children and families for their development. But in order to move practice in this direction, we also have to move organizations in which professionals practice to support these relationships and whole communities as well. And finally, Touchpoints has come to designate an international learning community of organization and communities around the country and now around the world who are working in this way. And just briefly, these are the key elements of the approach, and I will touch on a number of these in the next 40 minutes or so. So Dr. Brazelton, who originated this concept, became very concerned through the 1980s with the changes that he saw in families, and those led him to write first the book Working and Caring, which was about the split that families were having to make between the workplace and their families. That book came out in the late 1980s. And then the first edition of the Touchpoints book, which he published in 1991. He was concerned about the growing demands of the workplace on families and the way in which this really led to a kind of isolation that we just heard about in the last talk. And with it, the erosion of family traditions, neighborhoods, and community connections, all of which provide the kinds of supports for healthy relationships and therefore development, but also that provide the guidance that adult caregivers need as they raise their children. So today I will focus on one particular issue that this approach addresses, which is the role of parents' expertise. So what has happened to parents' expertise? It's been undermined, yes. What has undermined parents' expertise? What? Television? Experts, yeah. All of those books out on the table out there, yeah. I'm afraid some of mine are on it. I apologize. I told my editor recently I didn't know if I would ever write any more, actually. Yes, so I think one of the things that's undermined parents' expertise is that we have this academic industrial complex that has technopolized parenting wisdom and expropriated it from families and from culture and repackaged it and marketed it, creating a market by stimulating anxiety. I may be overstating it because I don't have very much time, but that's, I think, one quick description of the phenomenon that we face. Now, why is it a problem that parents' sense of their competence has been undermined? Babies pick up on it. And what happens when babies pick up on their parents' lack of a sense of their own competence in raising their children? They lack security, that's right. And it's not just babies, it's all the way through. And for many parents, it's easier to understand the cost of the loss of a sense of expertise when they are reminded of the experience of parenting a prepubertal child. Because it is during that period that, at least in our Euro-American culture, most parents are challenged in their sense of competence by their prepubertal child's behavior. So it's all the way through. So this is a central concern that I think is related to this conference, which is that child rearing is social and cultural, yet our professional cultures have overestimated the universality of Western child development knowledge and have really posited the notion of a science of parenting, which I think is deeply concerning. If there is a science of parenting, there are many different sciences of parenting, and they may be found in each culture, in each community, and indeed in each family. It is also problematic to posit a science of parenting because, once again, it assumes that the knowledge for parenting is in the ivory tower, which then cannot scale the delivery of that knowledge to families as if that one-way transmission were what we were after. Anyway, so instead, local knowledge of child development and child rearing are what we're after. And this, I'm afraid, flies in the face of much of our current policy and funding of programs. Now, this article has been cited, I think, by other authors of the books associated with this in previous conferences. But the basic idea is that something like 97% of the research in psychology and developmental psychology has been done on 1% of the world's population. This is a big problem. And yet, it is hardly ever recognized when we refer to the research to make our judgments about child development and parental functioning. So I think our challenge is to remind policymakers and funders of what science is. There are many different definitions of it. This is one that I found particularly enchanting. But we might also think about it as a series of, at best, less wrong approximations of reality. And that is not what policymakers or funders want to hear. They have a great deal of difficulty tolerating the uncertainty that is necessarily a part of science. But any of us who are familiar with the history of science, even a little bit, know that science proceeds through paradigms that during one period of time are very useful and compelling, and then begin to reveal their logical limitations, and then are supplanted by the paradigms that follow. So in the context of raising our children, we need a paradigm shift towards understanding that the sciences of parenting come from babies themselves, from the adult caregivers when they are present to be able to closely observe them, from the communities and cultures that they are developing in, and from the vision for their future that their communities have for them. In one of the Native American communities where we work, a young teacher in a Head Start program who was involved in making a film about their program concluded that science has finally discovered that we, meaning her people, were right all along. So I now am going to say more about the specific model of development that the Touchpoints approach proposes because of its implications for how we think about parents and our interactions with parents. And the idea is basically that we need a way to understand how change occurs. And Dr. Brazelton, in his 50 years of work with 25,000 children and their families, noticed that development proceeded through periods of disorganization followed by reorganization. Please don't take photographs. I don't have permission for the photos. This one is actually my son about 30 years ago, so it's okay if you take this one, but I don't have permission for these things to end up wherever they might. So Touchpoints is a way of understanding development as the child temporarily and predictably falling apart to come back together again with the emergence of new skills and capacities. And this must happen within the family and community system, which holds the component parts as the child comes through this period of disorganization, reorganization. And when the child falls apart temporarily, who else does? Who else does? The parents do. And anyone else who is working with a child. So this phenomenon has been observed in studies done in a number of different countries independently, but it was also observed by Van der Richt-Ploeg and Pluy, who looked at chimpanzee infants and mothers in the Gombe Reserve in Kenya. And they quantified increased seeking of physical contact, clinging, and crying, and saw that there were very specific periods in infants with abrupt increases in these behaviors, which was their equivalent of the temporary behavioral disorganization that preceded the emergence of a new skill or capacity. And in fact, they found in another study that there was a corresponding increase in the incidence of minor viral infections during these periods of behavioral disorganization, which suggests that development is stressful enough to actually have some impact on the immune system. So again, as we heard in the last talk, learning and growth happens through predictable stresses. And these periods of disorganization are periods of heightened vulnerability as well as periods of increased opportunity for learning. Here's an example of some of these periods which I think just allow you to readily see how the temporary disorganization in behavior can be challenging both to the infant and to the parent, and how new skills emerge as a result. I think you'll also notice that some of these, like the unexplained end of the day fussing between 3 and 12 weeks of age, like the predictable tantrums between 12 and 36 months, and the process of toilet training are all associated with increased risk of child abuse. So during these periods of behavioral disorganization in the child, as we said, the parents also become disorganized. And they worry very specifically first about their child. If my child's behavior appears to be going off track, is there something wrong with my child? And then when they're reassured that their child is okay, the next question they ask is, well, is there something that I'm doing that's wrong? And it is because of this disorganization in the parents where development inevitably causes them during these periods to question their own competence. That the last thing they need from any of us is the academic industrial complex making them feel less competent, or the medical, psychiatric, psychological, social work sectors making them feel like they're less competent. On the contrary, as their children move through development, if they need anything, it's for us to hold up a mirror for them to see where their competence and effectiveness lies as their children go through these touch points. So touch points, the word comes from this idea of points in time to touch into the family system, times of heightened risk, vulnerability, and opportunity. So I'd like to show you an example of a clinical encounter that I think puts together some very specific ways of reflecting back to a parent their competence and effectiveness. And this is at the newborn touch point, which is, I think, fairly easy to see as a period of disorganization and reorganization of enormous vulnerability and opportunity. And I'd like you to watch this video for the things this young pediatrician does with this mother and her newborn baby who's 2 or 3 days old that seems perhaps a bit different from what you might expect from your doctor. Now, when this tape was being made, this young doctor asked the nurses which family she might film in this city hospital that treats the poorest families in the city. And the nurses said, well, don't bother with this mother because she's depressed, she has a history of depression, she's not attaching to her child, and she doesn't want to take her child home. So the pediatrician said, well, I think that's just the family we want, because if this isn't useful for this family, then why bother? So look for the moments when you see the mother beginning to relax and to trust.
Putting a clean bath to use. Here is a pediatrician putting a clean bath to use in a hospital setting with a mother and her newborn.
You might need to turn down the lights if you can.
Some of what we do in the beginning, I can just sit right here next to you. Is that okay? So that you can see it. Some of it will just be sitting with you right here, okay? One of the things that we do with these little ones is to see how beautifully they see and hear. Do you notice that he sees you? Does he look at you? No, you haven't seen him look at you yet? Hi, Talkie. He's a talky boy already. Yeah. Have you noticed that he hears you? Do you think he can hear?
Sometimes.
Sometimes he hears you. Do you notice that he hears things like when a door shuts?
Things like real shaky.
Yeah, is that right? Yeah, well, we're going to see if he notices. I'm going to look at him and see if he follows my face and my voice, okay, since he's so wide awake. That was very good. That took some energy. Hi, there I am. You going to follow me? Oh, wow. You are so amazing. You are so awake. Hi, Reynard. Hey, Reynard. Can you look at me? Can you look at me? You do a good job, Bright Eyes. You do a good job. You do a good job. When was the last time he ate? When was the last time he was feeding?
Just 15 minutes ago.
Really? Is he breastfeeding or is he bottle feeding?
Bottle feeding.
He is, okay. Does he eat well? Is he a good feeder?
Yes.
Is he really? Mommy says you're a good feeder. You found it. Good job. You did it. You saw that beautiful ball, huh? He sees so well. Yeah, and he hears so well, too. Yeah, do you think he follows your face? When you look at him, does he follow your face? You notice? Does he follow your voice?
Yeah,
let's see how he turns. Why don't both of us talk, and we'll see which way this little guy turns, okay? Because I think he's been listening to you for about 4 months now, huh? Look at him, look at you.
Hi, Mom. Hi. Are you looking at me? Looking at me? Which way I go? Over here? Over here?
You know your mom's face. You know her voice. That was beautiful. That was lovely. Yeah, that was lovely. You're such a bright boy. You got such bright eyes. Yeah. Let me just see if he'll turn. I'm just going to hold him up a little bit and you say his name.
Renard. Renard.
He's so bright. He just clues right into your voice. Let's see how strong he is. I'm just going to put him right up here on the table. I'm going to unwrap him. He doesn't seem to mind at all when I unwrap him. Does he fuss a lot, or he seems to be a pretty easygoing guy?
He is easygoing.
He is easygoing, yeah. Is he like his brothers, or is he different?
I would say he's different.
You would, huh?
Yeah.
How is he different?
The other ones like to cry at everything.
Oh, he's different. The other one's crying more. Did you hear what Mommy says? She says you're an easygoing baby. Yeah. Look how nice his tone is, so strong. He has that nice strong tone. His legs snap back. When I pull them down like this, he snaps back. It's such a nice sign of health. And his color's so beautiful, nice and pink. He's just a beautiful baby. I pull his hands down and I'll watch his arms come back up. He's got that nice strength, huh? Very good. Hi, very good. You do such a lovely job. Do you think you want to sit up for just a minute? Wow, look how strong you are. Look at that. He's able to bring his head up and he's able to keep it up. Nice job. You don't even seem like you're working very hard. But I know it's taken a lot of energy. He's so bright and alert. Oh my goodness. I put him on his tummy. And look, he nicely turns his head right to the side. He even picks his head up a little bit. Look at that. And he crawls. Look at that. All a sign of a very nice, healthy, normal baby, huh? Look how he crawls like that. He turns his head. But you know, sometimes when babies are sleeping, we're not sure they would be able to turn their head. That's why we say when baby's asleep, he needs to be on his back. That's the safest way, huh? Look how he picks his head up. Did you know he'd be this strong?
No.
You didn't, huh? Boy, your little guy is really a really healthy little one, huh? He's not even little, he's big. How do you think he likes to be soothed?
Just rocking him.
You like to hold him.
Hold him.
Now, how does he like to be held? Does he like to be held up, or does he like to be held like this?
Up.
He likes to be held close to you, up. Yeah. He likes to feel, and he likes to probably smell your skin.
Yeah.
And that makes him calm down, huh? Yeah, he doesn't seem like he ever gets very upset, though. I just want to see how he just... Yeah.
Renard, we're going home tomorrow. Going to see your other sister, your brother, and grandma. We're going to see the rest of the family. Yes, we are.
You know, I just noticed, I think that's the first time he's quieted it down enough that his nose isn't making that noise anymore.
Are you going to have your first baby food tomorrow? No, not yet. No peas. No rice. You got plenty of time for it.
You two are beautiful together.
Yes.
You have such a nice way with him. It just looks right at you.
Yeah. He likes smoke.
He likes his mama, she says. And that is one of the most important things for a mother who is struggling with postpartum depression to know, is that her baby likes her. So what did you see this doctor do that might have been a little bit different than what we usually prescribe for doctors to do that you think helped this mother begin to trust and engage with the doctor and with her baby? What? Complimenting the baby, yeah. And she very specifically chose behaviors that they could witness together. So lots of pediatricians will say, oh, what a beautiful baby. Well, that's too easy, and nobody believes that. Oh, you say that to all of the new mothers, right? But to describe a behavior that they both experienced is very different from that. And she also picks out behaviors that the mother can claim credit for. She picks out behaviors to which one can attribute the mother's efforts. What else did you see this pediatrician do? Yeah?
I saw her really facilitating their interaction.
Yes, they facilitate the interaction. In fact, she did one thing that I didn't notice until I saw this tape about 100 times of that, just because I'm not very observant, I suppose. But she says twice, "Did you hear what your mother says?" She says, "You're a really easygoing guy." Or, "Did you hear what your mother says? You're a really good feeder." So imagine for this mother, the doctor's listening to her, listening to what she says, noticing that this is so important. I want to make sure your baby heard it too, so I'm going to say it to your baby so that he's in this three-way conversation with us. So it's sort of an unusual strategy, yeah. So what else did you notice? She models. She doesn't teach or prescribe. She models, and you could see the mother trying out the things that she saw. So very respectful, because she didn't say, "I know more than you, and you should do it like this," which unfortunately I think is the way many of our so-called evidence-based RCT proven parent programs work, because they're about the generic child and generic child development and not the child of the parent who is there. There was another comment over here. Yeah. Yes, right. So she focuses on the predictable behaviors that are strengths for this baby that she has good reason to believe are going to be meaningful. So it's shared discovery and observation of behaviors and carefully, not necessarily to interpret them, which is imposing our science. Sometimes we do if we've got a good reason to believe that we may join the parent there, but to elicit the meaning that the parent makes of the baby's behavior so that together we can co-construct a narrative of who this baby is. And I think in this 7.5-minute protocol called the Newborn Behavioral Observation, you could see this mother falling in love with her baby. One other point I wanted to, well, there are two other things I want to say. One is it comes from the Neonatal Behavioral Assessment Scale, which is a longer research protocol that's been used in many, many studies. And it really presents, among other things, to new parents, their baby as a social being. And that's what you saw was emphasized here. That at the very beginning of life, babies come into the world ready to interact. And in a way, when the Neonatal Behavioral Assessment Scale was first introduced in the 1970s, it was in part intended to undo the misinformation about babies that currently reign, that came from the medical establishment as not being social beings. In fact, in the 1970s, you could find in medical dictionaries things like babies are basically in a neurovegetative state for the first 6 months of life. And then the last thing well, you saw, does she like to be held like this or like this? Well, there's no right or wrong answer to that except what the mother thinks. So she looked for opportunities to have the mother know more than she did, to be the expert. And she also did not jump in when she asked the mother, "Are you breastfeeding or bottle feeding?" Now, if this were a room full of lactation consultants, need I say more? And when they ask, well, why didn't she tell her breast is best? Well, why didn't she? Because they were about 30 seconds into their relationship together, and that probably would have been the end of it. And then at the end, when the mother says, "Are you going to have your first peas? You're going to have your first rice?" Well, in a room full of clinicians, you can see people sort of edging forward in their seats, and somebody will say, somebody's got to tell her not to do that until the baby's 5 or 6 months old. But if you give this mother just a few more seconds, you can see that what she's really saying is, now I can envision the time in the future together when you will be ready for solid food. So I just wanted to show you this example of how I think professional practice can and should grow and change. Now I want to turn to the importance of relationships in development. We just, I think, saw this with this mother and baby and pediatrician. And you'll see how this, again, converges with what Dr. Perry heard us. So if we think about human development emerging in complex systems, the members of the system, which are all of us, are held together and connected through our relationships. And it's in these relationships that information and affective energy flow, and in which adaptations to each other and to our environment occur as a result of this flow of information and affect. And for this to happen in relationships, we can talk about constructs like shared states of consciousness, which comes from Ed Tronic's work, or emotional availability, and can think simply of it as the capacity of two humans to be authentically present in the moment. And to illustrate it, I will show you another videotape, which is from research done in the 1970s that many of you will be familiar with, but which I think you may agree still has not been sufficiently incorporated into the way we understand the implications of development for practice. If I can find it. Here we go. So this is an experiment in which a mother and a 2-month-old baby have separate cameras filming them in a split screen. And the mother is originally asked to interact as she normally would. And then, oh, you were, sorry. It's a minute and a half long. Well, you should show it too. I wonder if you have the same one. And then so you have more time. And it comes from work that Colin Trevarthen, who is here among us, did back in the 1970s in Jerome Bruner's lab, along with Ed Tronic and Barry Brazelton. And I think Dan Stern actually contributed to this thinking back then or in the following 10 years. And so you'll see that mother and baby interact, instructed to just do what they normally would do. And then the mother's asked to turn away, and when she turns back, to be unresponsive, inanimate, stone cold. And it's a way of demonstrating what happens when the mother is not present in the relationship.
There he is. There he is. What are you hidden? What are you hidden? What are you? What? What? What's that? What's that? Boom, boom, boom. Oh.
So who's leading who here?
Oh, yeah? Oh. Oh. Oh, you're yelling.
You can see he gets a little overstimulated, disengages briefly to pull himself together, and then comes back.
Smiley. Smiley.
That's great.
Don't cry.
Now, get up and walk aside so he can't see you.
Okay.
And then come back with a perfectly still face, flat face, and just sit in front of him. Yeah, and don't talk to him this time.
So it takes him 11 seconds to realize that she's not behaving as she usually does. And then he tries out 15 different behaviors to try to get her to do what she usually does. And you can see at the same time that he struggles to regulate himself, at times becomes overwhelmed by his distress, and then pulls himself back together again to reach out to her again.
Oh, that's nice. Yeah. Yeah. What's this? What's this, huh? What? Yeah. Ooh, oh, what's the matter, huh? What's the matter? Oh, yeah. You got a story to tell, huh? What are you going to tell me? What are you doing, huh? What's this? What's this? What's this?
So now she's come back and interacts as she normally would. And you could see that at first he was a little bit thrown off by that, but then he will come back to her. So usually when she turns away, people who work with young babies are surprised at how much distress this 8-week-old baby already shows, and I think many of you saw that. So you can also think of this as a simulation for a variety of things that interfere with the interaction and with the emotional availability of the mother or the adult caregiver and the child. And I really, as I, in the last few minutes, want to focus on the kinds of things that interfere with relationships that go beyond the mother-infant or the nuclear family, to look at interferences located within the community or in social forces beyond the family. Because all of this points to moving our interventions out of the clinic and out of fragmented programs, which are the only ones that lend themselves to being studied with the kind of evidence which currently is the only kind of evidence accepted by most policymakers and funders, to interventions that are community-based, community-wide, multi-level, and systemic. When you look at this list of interferences in the relationships that you've heard in this talk and the preceding one are necessary for development, it really speaks to a shift in the way we think about the work that we do. And this is just one way of representing the effect of a whole host of interferences, both at the level of the child and the parent and the forces that impinge on both of them that obstruct the interaction that you just saw. And one of the interventions that I think is well within our reach is beyond the parent-professional relationship, to open up the interactions between the parent or adult caregiver and the child to parent-to-parent, peer-to-peer interactions in the community. And so I thought I would close with a story that comes from the Harlem Children's Zone, where we were asked to help them develop their early childhood education programming. And they have now a K through 12th grade charter school, and they have a pre-kindergarten program, and they have a lottery for the residents of Harlem in order to be accepted into the pre-kindergarten program. And if you win this lottery, you are guaranteed a slot from kindergarten through 12th grade. And in Harlem, you can imagine that this is a very important accomplishment, so that when parents are accepted into this program, they are required to go to 14 Saturday morning classes, which is a huge burden, but they all do it because they want to keep their slot. So they asked us to come and teach the parents about 3-year-old development. And I think if you've heard anything from my talk, you would understand that that was something we were not prepared to do, and told them, we will not come and teach your parents about 3-year-old development. And they knew us by that point and said, well, come do your thing. And so, so we went into this classroom in this public school in Harlem with these parents of 3-year-olds, and we said, Dr. Brazelton and I, to white or pseudo-white guys from Harvard, so you all know a lot about 3-year-old development. And they looked at us like, why would you think we know about 3-year-old development? So we said, well, you all have 3-year-olds at home, don't you? Yep. Don't your 3-year-olds know a lot about you? Oh yeah, our 3-year-olds know a lot about us, they said. So we said, well, so tell us, what do your 3-year-olds know about you, and what do you know about them? So within about 45 minutes, the brave parents went first, and the shy parents went last. And each one told us what they knew and told each other. And we were quiet and simply wrote down attentively everything that they said on our flip charts. And in those 45 minutes, these parents produced the best textbook on 3-year-old development that you would ever hope to read. It was all right there in them in that room. And what they realized, I think, was how much each one of them individually knew and how much that was amplified by being connected to each other. How much value each one of them had for each other. So beyond parental competence, a sense of value and being able to give to other parents and to have the help and guidance of other parents. So one father actually said, it's completely unsolicited, he said, you know, when I heard I had to come to 14 Saturday mornings in a row to keep my kid in this program, I thought you people were out of your minds. That's when I do the laundry. That's when I do the grocery shopping. You guys don't know what it's like to be a single father in Harlem. But you know what? This is like my therapy. That's what he said. Everyone should have this. And then this mother looked at each parent in the eye around the circle, and she said, you know what, this is like back in the day. And we've talked, Darsha, about not romanticizing the back in the day, but she said, this is like back in the day. This is like old school. And to think that we will be raising each other's children all the way through the end of high school. Thank you. So I think I have about a minute or two for questions, if there are any. Yes? I can't hear you. Sorry.
Thank you for your presentation. And for those of us who aren't living in the Harlem Children's Zone or other places where all of those things are in the community, what do you think is the most powerful thing we as individuals can do in our communities to increase relationship connection and make that available to all the kids in our neighborhood?
I think I will not answer that, but I model that by saying, what do you all think?
Okay.
Let's ask all of you to answer that.
Okay.
But I do think, I mean, my first response is to recognize the wisdom and value that is all around us, and to welcome it and to connect to it, so that rather than starting with what we think we bring, to welcome what is there. So I suspect in this room, there are all kinds of really great answers to your question that would be far better than any I could give. So maybe you can talk about that together during your break.
Okay, thank you.
And with that, it looks like you're all eager for a break. So we have 5 minutes? Yeah, thank you.